How on earth can a private practice pay their clinicians competitively when the big guys just always seem to have a lot more money and resources to throw at employees? Well, I've got one guest today who is working through this and has a pretty good formula that's working for him, and he's going to share some of the details with us. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare, this podcast. And the mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Let's face it, when the provider owns the place and has the freedom to make the clinical decisions they are best, care is just better for everyone. And my guest today is David Jeter. Dave is a partner at Acceleration Physical Therapy, which has 4 locations in the greater Spokane, Washington area. Dave, it's early out there right now. I'm not going to divulge what time it is for you, but it is early, although quiet for you. And thank you for carving out some time to come on PracticeCare.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and I'm really, really curious about this topic that we're talking about today. First, help our listeners get to know you a bit better, kind of fill in some of the details on your bio. I'm curious, I ask more and more guests this, why you ended up choosing private practice, why you chose to be an owner rather than an employee, but just kind of help us get to know us, help us get to know you a little bit better.
Well, I always wanted to do private practice physical therapy over other settings of physical therapy. And when I started physical therapy practice, I almost immediately was looking for doing some sort of ownership model. Originally, I had asked my boss, hey, I want to do a satellite clinic on the other side of town. It certainly wouldn't compete with this current clinic. I want to open this thing up.
And you mean said, like another office of the boss's practice?
Yes, and what I offered him was, I'll take 50% partnership in this new clinic. You take 50% partnership in this new clinic. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. And then I said, okay, I'll take all of the financial risk. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. And then I said, okay, I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. I mean, looking in hindsight, he gave me a gift, because if I'm willing to take the financial risk, then I should have just started a practice by myself, which is what I did.
That's like a landlord, but better. Anyway, all right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's nice. The reason why the 50% would have made sense is because, putting together all of that is a challenge, whether we're talking about insurance contracts, whether we're talking about just payroll stuff and taxes and all the other bean counting sort of items. Right. I would have given away 50% of the profits to have an infrastructure and a name that was already there and referral sources that were already there. So there was some value there that he would have been giving me as well. But again, I would have been handing him a check every quarter. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So this was kind of in your blood from the beginning, so to speak.
Well, and I guess the interesting part is I always felt like when we started Acceleration Physical Therapy and we hired our first physical therapist, I thought to myself, okay, first of all, I need to make sure this person is happy. Second of all, I need to train them really, really well on how to do physical therapy. But also, they're going to be looking to start their own thing immediately. They have in my mind,
right.
I believe that they had a mindset that they were looking to start their own practice immediately. And I just over and over, I have found that is not the case. That most clinicians just want to do, they want to do PT and they want to be good at doing PT, which is great. That's fantastic. But I always felt like I always had this idea that they were sort of coming for the king, so to speak, and they were just ready to set up shop right across the street from me as soon as they felt like they were able to. And it really hasn't been the case. So now I'm almost at the other end of the spectrum where I have a bunch of clinicians who just want to be clinicians, but I need some leaders. I need some people who will step up and manage a few people and take a satellite clinic and be the person who is in charge. And that's, in some ways, that's kind of hard because again, I feel like lots of people lots of clinicians are focused on good clinical practice, which that's, again, I can't blame them for that. But at the same time, I guess I'm a little surprised.
Leadership is rare. added to the growing list of things that they don't teach you in PT school.
In PT school,
And,
yes.
it's only teachable to a point anyway. You kind of have to have some instinct in it as well, I think.
Yep.
So from the PT employee's point of view, we're talking about, a different kind of compensation model to compete with those who have more to pay, more value to offer, more dollar value to offer. What does it look like from a graduating PT's point of view? I mean, yes, it is true. To a point, you chase the money when you're young, when you're new. But what's it look like? Like, what are you competing against? And when you make an offer, what's in the back of their mind where you're like, I gotta hit these needs somehow.
Well, I mean, let's just start with a little bit of history of physical therapy. A million years ago, it was an undergraduate degree, and half a million years ago, when I went to school, it was a master's degree, and now it is a doctorate level degree. And so
Why?
It's mostly a keeping up with the Joneses sort of thing. Chiropractors, pharmacists, that sort of thing. We want to be seen in the healthcare community as people who have expertise in our area of practice, and so when you put that that title in front or after the person's name, then there is some gravitas there.
Okay.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. The idea that someone gets paid more because they have a DPT versus a MPT versus a PT is not correct at all. So that's part of the problem. So you went from 4 years of school to 7 years of school,
Yeah.
and student loans have obviously gotten way out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I now say that Eastern Washington University is probably one of the best value schools in the Pacific Northwest. We have people from Oregon who come all the way up to Eastern because there are no public schools in Oregon that offer physical therapy school. And so coming out of Eastern, it's not unusual to have about $150,000 worth of student loans for PT school. But if you come out of a private school, it's not unusual to have $250,000 of student loans from PT school. And when I look at someone who is, the average starting salary for PTs is somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000. I mean, that math is really hard to understand. How you're going to pay your student loan and maybe a car and maybe just try to buy a house. I mean, good luck trying to buy a house.
Yeah.
So, so students are definitely coming out chasing a little bit of money, not because they are greedy, but because they are just trying to do the math. They're looking at, okay, here's this budget that I have put down, and I have this degree that is supposed to be valuable, and how do I maximize it, I guess.
Yeah. And the sort of side note, I saw this stat once, the thing about, the nationwide student loan situation, whether you're for or against it, that nobody really talks about, is that supposedly half of all student loan debt is at the graduate level, whatever it is. And it's just never talked about. But there it is. So 150 grand at the low end, you've got 10 years to pay it off. Yeah. And you've got other expenses. So let's get into.
I would say even most clinicians that I talk to these days are saying, I'm never paying it off. So I'm going to pay the minimum amount for 20 years and then get it forgiven.
Yeah.
I'm never going to pay that amount off.
Because of the interest accrue. It's just, I don't know. Student loans seem to behave differently than most or all other loans in ways that don't make any sense to me, but for another podcast, another day. So this is what they're facing. So let's get into it. So tell us about your comp model today and kind of how you got there. What's it look like? What's different about it from the standard?
Yeah, well, we started out this comp model because we had really great clinicians coming to us at 5 years and 7 years and saying, okay, I'm looking for my raise, and looking at our own budget for our business and saying, you are a great clinician. You're a really good you're a really good PT. People like you, patients like you, referral sources appreciate you, but you're still billing out the same codes as everyone else. You're creating the same revenue as someone who is on their first day of being a PT.
Right. So
Now,
the code pays what it pays, no matter who's delivering the service, right?
absolutely. So when you look at reimbursement that has been flat for as long as I've been a PT, which is quite a while, and you look at costs of things like healthcare costs, business healthcare costs, and rent costs, and every other cost that we have are going up. Front desk person. Again, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I would have liked to pay my front desk people $8 an hour, but there was a day where you could pay them $8 an hour, and that was fine. That was what the going rate was. Now you're not even close to that. So we just kind of ran into the some of the same math of the new grads, where we were like, we can't continue to give people raises every time. We need to give them a little bit of a feeling of ownership, where they are at the mercy of the system that they work in. And so we went to a production-based pay model, where you quite literally get a percentage of what you bring in. And that percentage is based on how many staff members you're using, if you're using a PTA or not. And that obviously that number moves around a little bit. But the basic math is, we figure out how much we need to pay the bills, and a little bit of profit on that. And then we give the rest to the clinician. And it's up to the clinician to have a lower, they get paid more by having a lower no-show cancel rate, by saying yes to a person who, I really need to get in. Okay, well, maybe we'll do a 7:40 appointment instead of a 8 o'clock. We'll just kind of squeeze one more in. They get paid more by making sure that their billing is correct, that they're not just letting people walk out and say, oh, I don't have time to do the gym today. It's like, well, okay, well, that's two Theract codes or Therax codes of billing that we're just leaving on the table if a person doesn't do what we're planning on having them do for the day.
So, all right, let me restate it, see if I have it. So for a month, so we're in March. So for March, you and I are the two PTs in this practice. And at the end of the month, you've produced 70% of the appointments or the revenue, and I've produced 30%. And so whatever the profit is that's available to share amongst the two of us, whatever the owner determines it to be, you would get 70% of it, and I would get 30% of it. Is that right?
Correct. Like you would, sort of. I guess in that model, I would.
Is that like the spirit of it?
That's sort of the spirit of it, but I guess I would hope that if you're only doing 30%, I'm doing 70%. That's probably because I'm using more staff. I have a PTA that is working with me who is doubling my ability to, because we all have billable hours.
Sure.
And you can't have 3 people in the gym at one time. So so it's not that much of a discrepancy. Again, where you get a little bit of discrepancy is people saying yes and people saying no. People saying, hey, I have this normal day off. Everybody works 4 days a week for us, but I see that Bill is going on vacation next week. I'm happy to work my day off and I guess they would get paid for that anyway. But again, at the end of the day, they're getting a percentage. They're getting a percentage of whatever comes in, and that of course is delayed by a couple of months. Billing cycles. So people think it would be very choppy, but it's not. You can go on vacation for a week, and you wouldn't see that at all in your in this payment model.
So really, all right. So the core spirit of it is, see if I get this right, keep the appointment book full, make sure that every code that is clinically appropriate to use is being used. Make sure your billing's clean so that you're producing the most, and then you're getting the payments as fast as possible. And the more you do that, the better off you'll do as an employee.
That's also true, and frankly, you're only going to get a raise if insurance companies decide to pay us more, and that's unfortunately that's a fact of life of the business that we live in. And I think that was part of why we went to this, because because again, we had good clinicians who were coming to us 5, 7 years and saying, okay, I want my regular annual raise as I would at any other profession. And we were kind of looking around saying like, okay, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Why
Me too. Where's it
would we
coming
lose
from?
money? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, get
Where's
line,
my
but the line
raise?
forms behind me.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we just kind of said, I guess we're just acknowledging that we are part of a healthcare system where insurance companies are driving what we get paid.
Mhm. And so do you have therapists who just don't do it anyway? They just kind of come in, treat what comes in the door, whatever comes in, and then, leave when their day is up? Or do they stick around? Do you want them to, I mean, you don't want them to stick around, I suppose, but do they?
Well, that's the other thing. I also, I don't want to pay you to do your paperwork at the end of the day. If you want to write Moby Dick for all of your paperwork, and you want to take an extra hour at the end of your day, you can feel free to do that. And under this model, because
Mhm.
I'm not paying you on an hourly basis to sit there and clack away at your computer.
Right.
Um, you have that, and again, incentivizes you to be efficient during your day. So when you're done with your patients, you don't have this stack of charts that you have to start on.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess it, there's no incentive. I guess there's no incentive either way, but I don't feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick when I go home before somebody else and
Mhm.
they're sitting there, continuing to do their work.
But I mean, like, do you have PTs on staff who just don't do the production-based model much at all? Like,
Yeah, we certainly have clinicians who are more successful and who are less
right.
successful at it. But I think in some ways, uh, they they tend to make the money that they want to make, and those who are
Mhm.
more ambitious are more ambitious with it, and those who are less ambitious are less ambitious with it. And I think that's also a nice thing, because you just get to let people be what they want to be, and you're not trying to shoehorn them into a thing.
Right. Right. I'm curious. I don't know if this is how answerable of a question this is, but so just tell me. But approximately what percentage, just percentage of the profit would you say you turn around and redistribute as, I'm going to call them bonuses for lack of a better word,
Mhm.
every month or every quarter, as opposed to keeping it yourself?
A profit.
Because in my mind, I'm picturing this is like a bonus pool. That's the term I'm using. I don't know what else to
Mhm.
call it, but every month or every quarter, there's a bonus pool that gets, and its size is to be determined by how productive the clinics are overall. Um, but there's the overall, because you said at the beginning, you keep some profit for yourselves, as you should, and then the rest is used to, reward the productivity of each individual therapist according to how productive they were. I'm just curious, like, what percentage of the profit?
Um, Again, I think of it as in a different way. I think of it
Okay.
as you're paying, if there's 100% of what you bring in, you are paying a certain percentage towards your costs, and those costs are the building
Yeah.
costs and the insurance costs and the front desk and the aides and all the equipment and all of those things. And that ends up being, for a single clinician, probably in the ballpark of 73%, something like that. And then they take home the rest
Okay.
on top of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I have a former client. She was similar. It was so, I loved the model. And so essentially she was they're counselors, therapists, like psychologists, that world. And she had this really nice structure set up where, yeah, the more hours you saw, so a full-time, let's say it was 30 hours a week of seeing patients, you didn't need to see that many. You needed to see, like, I think it was 20 or 22 or something. And that was like what your salary was based on. Anything above that, you could kick in some additional, like,
Mm-hmm.
bonuses. And all she wanted to do, so it's Tuesday afternoon and client X cancels, work the phone, see if you can fill that time slot with somebody else. And if you do, you've more money's coming to you. And man, some would just do it and some wouldn't. And she would just bang her head against, I don't know what else to do. Like, why aren't they? I don't know. It was just really interesting to watch. Some just some would grab back to the ownership model, right? Some are wired for ownership and leadership, and some are not. So really interesting. So what's the for you? Like, you're the designer and the implementer of your comp model. What's the best part of it for you, and what do you think is the worst part of it for you?
I think the best part of it is when we have fluctuations in payer, the different types of payers, that doesn't hit us as hard. We also don't get the benefit of different payers. So obviously, in physical therapy, it is wildly diverse in terms of what insurance contracts pay you. Everything from DSHS, Medicaid to up to PIP and car insurance.
True, yeah.
So that could quite literally be a 3 to 4-fold increase in reimbursement. So if you had a run of 100 car accidents in a row, or if you had all Medicaid patients all in a row, that would be a massive difference in revenue. And so I think that kind of smooths out a little bit of that for us. But I think more importantly, it gives people the freedom to say, okay, I want to take these 3 weeks off in the summer to go to Ireland, and I want to do that, and maybe I'm gonna work a little bit harder before, and I'm gonna work a little bit harder after, but I can financially tolerate that. And we say, okay, great. I mean, as long as we can cover you while you're gone, then you can do whatever you want in that realm. And there's other clinicians who say, hey, I'm a new grad. I'm thinking about buying this house. I'm not taking a vacation at all this year. And I'll let you get away with that a little bit when you're young, but you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that forever. We're not going to have people burning themselves out. But so it gives people flexibility to make some of those choices on their own and be responsible for those choices. And then we're not also having conversations that look like, okay, well, I want more every year. It's like, well, you're getting what you can get every year. It also is helpful for us because new grads, we don't pay new grads less than we pay seasoned therapists. And part of the reason why, again, just like what we came back to, is they are billing out the same codes and getting reimbursed the same amount. And
the code doesn't care who's delivering the therapy, right?
Exactly. And maybe they should, but that's not the world that we live in. Again, the downsides are we are paying our new grads more, and we're not subsidizing our seasoned therapists with our new grads. And so I can appreciate that maybe a seasoned therapist might look around and say, well, I can go over to this other clinic and they'll appreciate the fact that I have 7 years of experience and whatnot. So that might be a problem for us in the future.
Yeah. So how long have you been running this comp model?
We've only been doing it for about 2 years now.
Okay.
So, there hasn't been a mass exodus, though we've felt a little bit of the great resignation.
And so how did they react when you kind of rolled this out?
People were, I think that's also a really big downside of this is the questions and the concern about, like, okay, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? What am I going to end up with? And so obviously you just kind of do the math a little bit and you can show them, and you just kind of have to go a little bit on trust. So what we found, though, the worst part of it is when we're hiring new therapists and they're looking around and they're comparing us to other clinics, because they go, okay, well, I can for sure have this amount of money over here, but you're potentially saying I could have maybe some more money over here, but we don't really know. It's all based on this math thing. And so we've had some people who just weren't comfortable with the idea of the model. And so we've lost some good people in the interview process. We felt like we had done well, and they liked the culture of our clinic. And then at the end, they said, you know what, I like this better. So that's been a problem for us, as well as trying to sell it to other to seasoned clinicians who we are interviewing to join our staff, that aren't used to that. They want a little bit more. I hate to say solid, because it's solid. You're seeing patients, you're billing. It's no different. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a salaried clinician and you're not seeing patients because you're too slow, guess what? You don't have a job anyway. You know, people pretend, that it's somewhat tenuous and fragile, but it's no more or less fragile than a salary-based system. I promise you.
Yeah, you're just kind of making them aware of it beforehand. When you're salaried, if the ship sinks, take a look more. So Signature, Silicon Valley Bank crashed last week. The employees didn't know until 24 to 48 hours. They were salaried. Yeah, you're just kind of giving them a peek into, look, the better we do, the better you do. But there's kind of a ceiling, and it's called reimbursement, and we don't know what's walking in the door. So yeah, it's interesting. As you were saying that, I was thinking this is like the culture is kind of intertwined, right? I keep coming back to my mind the word of like, we're sort of an ownership culture here, and here's what it looks like. We as owners deal with this. You're going to deal with it too. There's ways for you to you never lose, but there's ways for you to win bigger. Just the more productive you are, the better we all do. And yeah, I guess some will want that and some will not.
Yeah.
Anything you would do differently about this if you could?
No, I think if somebody was going to do this for themselves, I think you have to really do some good hard math about what your budget actually is and what your reimbursement actually is, and try to capture all of it. And I think we did some back of the envelope stuff, and we probably should have done a little bit more thinking about that, because once your percentage is set, it is somewhat set. There's no real going back on that. I guess you can adjust that with newer hires, but that's sort of the deal. If you're giving someone a percentage, that percentage probably shouldn't change over time.
Right. Well, I gotta tell you, it's really interesting. I get the rationale. I think I understand the basics of how it works. It sounds pretty straightforward. Yes, the details are kind of where all the action is, but nevertheless, and I appreciate you coming on and describing it. A couple of kind of wrap up questions. First, is there anything you think I should have asked you about this, but just didn't, that's valuable to those listening?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I guess the only thing I'll say is when clinicians are actually in this system and they are doing it, and they can see the revenue that they've generated, and they can see that they get a part of it, they do take more ownership of it. They take ownership of their part of the clinic, and they take that on, and that's kind of what we wanted. We wanted people to feel like they had some skin in the game, and if they did what they were supposed to do, they would do better. And if they didn't do what they were supposed to do, then that's okay too, if that was their choice. And I guess we wanted to make it feel like you don't have to work your butt off in this model, but you can, and you'll get rewarded for it.
Neat. Okay. And then the other wrap up question is, so we've caught somebody's attention who's listening to this, and they're like, wow, you know what? I want to take a look at what Dave's talking about, see if I can go down that path. Where would you recommend they start? I mean, you started at some point a couple of years ago or before that. So what's a good starting point?
We started by just looking at what everybody else was doing. We have some good clinicians or good clinics in town that are willing and able to talk about how they do things. Another clinic does something where you have a base salary, you need to make a certain amount of money And then on top of that, you get a percentage of what's on top of that. That sounded like new math to us. That sounded really challenging to figure out, like, exactly, okay, well, what does that mean, for people? And the more we talked about that, the more we talked about it with our clinicians, the clinicians were like, I don't understand what this is going to be like. And I don't understand, it sounds like I'm just going to get base pay. And that wasn't going to be great. And so we said, well, forget it. Let's just take the math out of the game, and we're just going to do a straight percentage. And people said, okay, well, that's simple. I like that. And it works. So that's why we chose the model that we chose. But I think probably the best thing is really looking at your budget and your numbers and saying, okay, how much, what are our actual costs? And then going back to your clinicians and proposing a model and saying, like, this is what I think we should do. And you can structure it however you want to structure it and get buy-in from the people around you, for sure.
Mm. So do you and your partners, do you take less profit home in your own pocket in this model compared to what you used to do?
I would say Beth and I are probably doing less well than we did in the past. And maybe potentially some of that is some of that has to do maybe with that we should have had a little bit lower percentage. Some of that might be due to our payer mix changing over time. Some of that might be due to other increased costs in terms of other hard costs in terms of rent and health insurance and all the other costs for business. So our model has changed a little bit in terms of what we profit to a real estate model, which is a whole nother podcast. But but yeah, I think it's steady for us. But we're certainly not taking home more money.
Right. Well, and most of those things you listed are outside of your control anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so it would have been less anyway. It just sounds like what you're doing is you're getting more ownership skin in the game in your clinic than just the two of you, just the two actual owners. Which means
and I think the other issue is our clinic takes all insurance, and that is part of our mission statements, to serve the community by taking all insurance. And we have done that by adjusting our model as needed in terms of how we see people. And there may come a time where that just doesn't work, where we can't see Medicaid. I mean, we do about 25% Medicaid right now. I mean, Spokane is probably like, I would guess, I don't know what the real number, but I would say Spokane is probably at least a third, if not half, on some sort of Medicaid program.
Wow.
So when you look at that number and you say, okay, these people need high quality physical therapy, who else if not us? Then you have to ask the question, like, are you going to be a part of the problem and have this clinic where only people who are quite wealthy can participate, or are you going to actually serve the community and see everybody who walks in the door? And so far our model has been to see everybody who walks in the door,
which is a hell of an endorsement for the model that you have. So cool. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on PracticeCare. I'm intrigued, interesting topic. We're going to put all your contact information that you gave to me in the show notes, so that if anybody's curious, they can reach out and see if they can start up a conversation with you. And then a couple of other points before we wrap up. First, if you're someone like Dave that owns a private practice, and you've got an experience on the business side that you think others would benefit from, or if you're people like me who serve private practices, same thing, and you've got some experience you want to share to help them out, we really want you to come on PracticeCare and tell the world about it. In the show notes for Dave's episode, all episodes, is a link, a couple of questions. Tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to PracticeCare on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks very much, and until next time.